seed is planted, watered, and placed in the sunlight. Somehow it knows to split open under the ground. From that, a little stem is formed that reaches down into the soil to form roots, and up forming leaves, and continuing to grow to a full-sized plant or even 100-foot-tall tree. All of this is happening around us all of the time, but we can't see it as it happens, not with our physical eyes, because our brains cannot comprehend this extremely slow movement. Does this mean it isn't happening? Of course not. We see the results, so we know that the plant is growing. But no one knows exactly why or how it knows to grow. What causes the process? All of this knowledge is inherent in each and every seed. Somehow there is a form of consciousness that connects them all and of which they are entirely unaware. At least I think they're unaware. This simple example gives a good argument for the existence of a universal consciousness that oversees all. Not just plants, but minerals, animals, and human beings as well. Human beings who exist on emotional, mental, and spiritual levels, as well as the physical, share a universal consciousness, often called unity or oneness. Is the flower conscious of the physical process it goes through? No. No more than we are conscious of our hearts beating, our lungs inhaling and exhaling, the blood coursing through our veins, or the growth of the fetus in the mother's womb. These processes go on without our conscious direction or intervention. As we mature and grow, we can become conscious of our emotional and mental processes. We can learn to control our emotions, to raise them to a level that is more acceptable to whatever society we live in than the base instincts we share with other animals. We can learn to control our desires and our ways of reacting to stressful circumstances, and are encouraged to do so by civilized society. We can replace base desires with higher aspects of emotion, replacing lust with love, for example. And we can learn to understand certain situations without becoming angered by them, or by finding more acceptable outlets for our anger than acting on it. Our intellect, our higher mind, looks for concepts beyond mere logic and reason. We see our lives and ourselves from a physical perspective, but somehow we know that there is more. We begin to question what we have been taught, to see its limitations. We begin to explore more abstract concepts, including religions and philosophies. We know that there is more. Are we each unique, or are we interconnected? How? Why? Does something or someone direct us? Is there a God? For Theosophists, many of these questions are answered through patient and detailed study. In Isis Unveiled, The Secret Doctrine, and Key to Theosophy, H.P. Blavatsky delves into cosmogenesis, explaining in great detail the origin of all from an occult or esoteric perspective. Based on ancient wisdom she gathered through her lifetime, through her discourses on anthropogenesis and the three fundamental propositions, we learn of the oneness of all life, periodicity, and cyclicity, and the pilgrim's path that all of us tread, carrying us from life to life as we gain insight and understanding. Like Blavatsky herself, at some point, the true student of Theosophy, of the ancient wisdom, realizes that its study leads to more than just intellectual learning. Our study must touch every facet of our lives. It must touch the very essence of our being. We must sink our roots deep into the study outlined by Blavatsky, Alcott, Judge, Besant, and others as we strive toward universal consciousness. In the little book, The Doctrine of the Heart, extracts of letters from Indian friends to Annie Besant, it says, "For the disciple, little is gained from teaching on the intellectual plane. The knowledge that infiltrates from the soul down in the intellect is the only knowledge worth having. And surely as the days roll by, the disciple's store of such knowledge increases. And with the increase of such knowledge comes about the elimination of all that hinders him on the path." This path is not for everyone. It is a strenuous journey to undertake. It requires dauntless courage, spotless purity, a strong intellect, a clean heart, the ability to discern the real from the false, and the ability to separate head learning from soul wisdom. We can begin consciously at the emotional and mental levels of our being to gain the soul wisdom of which the voice of the silence speaks. As to head learning, study is the first of the three pillars of Theosophy, which are study, meditation, and service. We do need head learning. We do need our intellect, a strong intellect, but it is just a beginning, a base for what lies beyond. We sometimes disagree. We should expect to disagree and even argue at times. Our job is to learn from all that, to take a step back, ideally every day, and look at what has transpired and our part in it. We must examine our thoughts, our words, and our actions, paying attention to our part in the daily interactions of life. We must learn to be patient with others and with ourselves, allowing them and us to make mistakes. We must see these mistakes as just that, mistakes or missteps, and not assign any greater significance to them. We must learn to forgive others and ourselves as well for any mistakes we might make and to move on to a new day. It does no good to dwell on such things. We learn the lessons of a clean heart from everyone and everything. The second pillar of Theosophy, meditation, can also help us to develop the qualities we need to enter the path. Through meditation, we can gain the sense of calmness and serenity we need to deal with the adverse situations that life brings to us. We can learn how to deal with and maybe even understand difficult people. It has been my experience that if I enter meditation holding a person with whom I'm having difficulties in my mind, while wishing for them their highest good, remarkable things can happen. There are many methods of meditation. Through some, we concentrate on gaining insights into ourselves. Through others, such as loving kindness or meta meditation, we attempt to open our hearts and develop compassion for ourselves and others. Silent meditation on the breath, some object or a teacher or other who inspires us leads us toward no thought or emptiness or universal consciousness. In Universal Consciousness, the Diamond Heart Book 2 goes on to say, there is no experience, no experiencer, no self. The elimination of separateness, the elimination of discrimination. There is a complete non-differentiation. Is this the soul wisdom of which the voice of the silence speaks? It is quite likely its source. Where do we find it? How do we develop it? We have already said that we must go beyond the intellect, that we must have the courage to consciously change ourselves on the emotional and mental levels of our being, and that meditation can help us to reach the next level. Once the higher ego is reached, the knowledge that the laws and powers which govern the universe are infinitely wise becomes instinctive. It is the feeling of an inward calm, an unconcernedness that lets us know we are moving towards soul wisdom, that we have touched upon universal consciousness. We feel a peace that outward events seem not to touch, and peace in the midst of outward throes is inevitable. As with unconsciousness of activity inherent on the physical level of our being, the spiritual level moves and grows unconsciously as well. It is our job to work ceaselessly through soul wisdom by consciously addressing our inward nature, thereby altering and improving what we think, say, and do in our lives. But the spiritual growth itself happens whether we are aware of it or not. Usually not. Wholehearted devotion to this process is required of those on the path, as well as trust that our efforts will bear fruit, that we will gain that to which Blavatsky herself aspired, the exalted goal of self-realization, that freedom of the self which is the crown of all human existence. One of my teachers once said that love is the realization of unity. The terms unity, universal consciousness, and oneness seem to me to be interchangeable. So we might say, as the Beatles said, that love is all there is. Universal consciousness, as universal love, is an expression of the harmony of all that is. There is no conflict because it contains no parts, no divisions, no separateness. It is pure consciousness, devoid of any thought or anything to rub up against. There is nothing to judge, nothing to weigh or measure, nothing to be prejudiced against or biased toward, nothing to fear. It is pure love, a love that accepts and encompasses everything and everyone impartially as a totality. If we are fortunate enough to touch this consciousness, even for a brief moment, we know that nothing else exists. There is no I, no ego, no personality, Only pure consciousness. Only pure love.